You're ready to rock. Hello and welcome everybody to another iteration of Nerding Out. I am your host, Nic Bodiford. The date is January 10th, 2023. We are post week 18, and I am joined by our main guy, our leader, Pete Rogers. Pete M. Rogers. Pete, how you doing?
I'm good, Nick. How are you?
Good.
Another fantasy season is over and past, and this is the period of time where like the NFL playoffs hit, and you're like getting excited for that. But it's also kind of a moment where I take a big sigh of relief because I'm like, I can just now watch football if I want to and not have to stress about like what advice did I give that's not coming to fruition, or like what articles am I going to have to write based on all this. It's just kind of like I get to just enjoy some football.
What do you experience most profoundly? The enjoyment of watching the game, being right about a call, or hating being wrong?
That's a good question. It's definitely not enjoying the game. Watching football has taken kind of a backseat for me in recent years, but I feel like being wrong is just so common that you kind of like have built a response to that. Being right when you are like, especially if it's, and I know you felt this, where you like kind of are going out on a limb and you're going against the grain and you're like, you know what, I feel it in my bones. I can't really explain it. This is just going to happen. And it does. And you're like, oh God, this feels amazing. and then you have to play that line of like, okay, don't be a dick about it, but also make sure that you promote the fact that you were right on this.
There was a PFF show that Ian and Dwayne, because Ian and Dwayne do their Sunday night recaps, and there was one that I was listening to in like week 11 or something, because I with the DFS cheat sheet there, I would do one player that would just be like way out there.
Yeah.
And Ian confided on air to Dwayne after like 4 weeks or so of me having these stupid plays, kind of like weird plays that ended up hitting. He was like, when Nick first sent me that he wanted to talk about some of these players, I almost didn't let him do it. And I'm glad I did, because it ended up being right. But it's like, those are the ones where you just want to like shout from the rooftops, where you're, just like I was on the New York Giants wide receivers, like like Isaiah Hodgins and Richie James in these blow up spots. And those are players that like people don't even want to touch for their lineup. And when they hit, it's like, yes.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, the DFS world, especially, or any kind of like starts and sits just on a week to week basis, because so rarely are you ever going to hit on someone season long. Like so rarely are you going to be like, this person is going to be like, it's just such a long season. So many things can get in the way of like that prediction being right. But on a week to week basis, you can really be like, just like there was the first time when, Zay Jones had 3 touchdowns. Like no one was thinking that Zay Jones was going to have 3 touchdowns. And it's just like those kinds of weird blip games happen. Or like, last year, I think Kendrick Bourne had like a couple of like wide receiver 1 performances. And you're just like, sure, the Patriots offense can't do that, but okay. I mean, certainly now they can.
I hear you. All right. So let's carry this. And so talking about, weird finishes and stuff like that, what we're going to do today for the listeners, we're going to do kind of a recap show and then conclude with some thoughts looking toward 2023. And our first section is very straightforward, and it's just the best quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, running back. I'm going to let Pete start here, and we'll start with, the ultimate position in football, quarterback. Pete, who is your best quarterback for fantasy or not? Open-ended, but who is your best quarterback of 2022?
Yeah, I think I went not a different route. I went mostly going in terms of players who, to the most extent, outperformed their ADP. There's one excuse or one difference that I had, but for quarterback, I kind of was split between 2 guys. So I'll talk about both of them because I love both of them. Jalen Hurts, you weren't getting at a wild discount. He was a QB 6 in ADP is what I was seeing when I was trying to find out some back stuff. I think that's what Fantasy Pros had him as. He finished as QB 3, so you got a nice return there. But I think the thing that most people didn't expect was how prevalent his passing game was going to be in terms of how efficient that production was going to be. And obviously the addition of AJ Brown is huge. And then they kind of started getting Devonta Smith involved at the second half of the season. So Jalen Hurts finished as a top 3 quarterback on NerdBall in both of our per ratings, which is fantasy points per attempt, and then also in terms of neck ratings, which is a consistency and efficiency metric. And so it wasn't just that you got like a couple of boom games from Jalen Hurts, or that Jalen Hurts was doing it with his legs, but his passing, his production through the air left something wanted. It was that he was doing it both on the ground, primarily through the air, and was super efficient through the air. And I think that he was a guy going into the year that a lot of people in both real football and fantasy football, people had mixed opinions on as to whether or not he was going to take that sophomore year leap with the weapons that Philly had put around him. And he did that. He looked like a much more confident passer. And so that is a guy who I think that if you took a shot on him, and it was a shot going into this year, if you took a shot on him, especially in that kind of QB doldrum section where you didn't get one of the elite guys and you were going to kind of spend a early to middle round pick to get a guy, you want to hit on those quarterbacks because that can really sink your team if you don't. For instance, if you got a Russell Wilson, that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But Jalen Hurts was a guy who went around there and certainly outperformed what his expected ADP was. My other guy is Justin Fields, just because he went on that tear where he was just like the unquestionable, he was a league winner for a period of time there. And that was truly remarkable to see. And it was just a historic rushing performances from him.
So I also went with Jalen Hurts, and
love it.
I mean, part of this award is just like it belongs to Howie Roseman in the team that they've constructed around him. But what I mean by that is that they've helped him flourish. This is not like that Hurts is being held up by these other players. I think the AJ Brown acquisition was phenomenal. So Hurts was number 12 in ADOT, he was number 11 in completion rate, and number 2 in yards per pass attempt. And you get an outlier guy like AJ Brown, who, like Ben Gretsch, has done a ton of work talking about how yards after catch are really volatile. It's not like a sticky statistic, especially guys with downfield ADOTs. And somehow AJ Brown has been the guy who has the downfield average depth of target and is elite after the catch. And that was just like the perfect friggin' pairing.
Yeah.
To complement Hurts, because he, 12th in ADOT. So he's not uncorking him every single time. And that's unfiltered. So I'm sure that there are some guys and wow, Marcus Mariota, that is crazy that he's number 1. But anyways, there are some guys in there who probably should be filtered out. But the point is, like, he's not a dink and dunk quarterback. He's got a strong arm. And we haven't even touched on like his historic rushing ability. And
mm-hmm.
You mentioned that he finished quarterback 3. He did. That's true. He also, just in points per game, though, he missed 2 games. He finished as quarterback 1, 25.6 per game. Had he not been injured, I think we'd see significant difference in the like win rates at the end of the year, player on championship rosters. He'll probably still be on a lot of them, but he looks like a more mobile Josh Allen, and I think they just have their quarterback of the future, and it's super cool to see that. On the Justin Fields point, I like that a lot. Over at 33rd Team in the 5 Things We Learned piece from week 17, I broke down the top three scorers and how they had a pretty big gulf between them and the number 4 quarterbacks, and that was Hurts, Mahomes, and Josh Allen. But if you factored in Fields after Matt Eberflus made his play calling changes to like bring in some Baltimore principles in week 6, Fields was in that tier. And it's going to be super interesting to see what the Bears do with the number 1 overall pick. Should they draft another one? There's another quarterback. There's some really smart people, like Kevin Cole is talking about how they should draft a second quarterback. And I when he first put that theory forward, I thought he was insane, but the guy he was talking about then was Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, maybe they should take another quarterback. Maybe you should never stop drafting quarterbacks no matter what. I don't know what the answer will be, but Justin Fields, I think he's just as deserving here. And it's going to be exciting to watch him develop. My best wide receiver pairs nicely with Hurts. It's the guy that I didn't talk about here. Devontae Smith. So this guy, he entered the NFL and everyone was just freaking out about his BMI, because his body mass index, because he is just, the Slim Reaper, I think was what they were calling him. He broke out in his second season, and I really, I almost put him as one of my misses. And it's not that I like thought that he would be bad. I just didn't buy into the idea that he was going to take this significant second year leap. But, he finishes in just on the season as a whole as the wide receiver 10 in half PPR scoring.
And a lot of that production, I feel like, came at the second part of the year. Like he kind of, and maybe I'm wrong or maybe I misremember, but it felt like that first part of the year, it was like Jalen Hurts was the Jalen Hurts / AJ Brown / Miles Sanders show. And Dallas Goedert. Then Dallas Goedert got injured. And then all of a sudden Devonta Smith was just putting up like monster games. And you're like, oh shit, I forgot that this was their number 2.
So he had, I think what's skewing the memory there is that he went 0 for 4 in week 1.
There you go.
And then he went 7 of 7 for 80 in week 2, 8 of 12 for 169 and a touchdown in week 3. And he got quieted in week 4 again. He was a little bit volatile, but the guy, he looks like a bona fide NFL wide receiver. I think, maybe he could operate as the number 1, but that's kind of one of those like, well, it doesn't really matter because they got AJ Brown anyway. So
it's like a T Higgins, Jamar Chase, where you're just like, sure, why do I have to say one is a 1 and one is a 2? Like, it's great to have both. They're both amazing wide receivers. Let them run.
So factoring in wide receiver, ADP, where you were getting, I mean, he was not drafted anywhere near wide receiver 10. I think he was. I don't have it in front of me, and come on, fantasy websites, you guys got to get it together here, because the ADP data is so much more difficult to find. But he was drafted, as I recall, as like a wide receiver 3 at best, and he smashed that. So Devontae Smith gets my best wide receiver nod. How about you?
Before we do mine, I just wanted the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games of Devonta Smith. 8 targets, 5 catches, 102 and a touchdown. 8 targets, 5 catches, 64 and a touchdown. 8 targets, 5 catches, 126. 12 targets, 8 catches, 113 and 2 touchdowns. 13 targets, 9 catches, 115, and then 8 targets, 7 catches, and 67 yards. Like that is what I mean by like, all right, maybe the first half of the year, he was probably doing some really good stuff, but like that last portion of the season, the last 6 games of the season, he had 587 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's like absurd numbers. My top guy for wide receivers, again, was I was looking at return, and this is kind of a shout out to the whole offense because no one thought they were going to do this, but Tyler Lockett finishing a fringe wide receiver 1 with Geno Smith under center. And everyone's like, stay away from the Seahawks passing game. We're not even going to get close to this thing. And Tyler Lockett, like somehow he was such a volatile receiver with Russell Wilson, where he would have these just like monster games where he'd have 3 touchdowns and then he would have zeros. And yet this year with Geno Smith, he finished as a top 10 wide receiver in net consistency rating. So he was a pretty consistent guy. And I know this because I had him on my fantasy team. Very pleased about that. But going at the ADP I found for him was wide receiver 42. I mean, so you're like talking a wide receiver 4, maybe, and then finishes a fringe wide receiver 1. I had to give out a shout out to this whole Seahawks passing game because I mean, just Geno Smith went absolutely crazy, and all the power to him, and Pete Carroll for like somehow knowing that. I don't know if I will give Pete Carroll that benefit of the doubt, but sure, maybe he did. He didn't go with Drew Lock, so I guess we'll give him that as props. But Tyler Lockett becoming like a consistent wide receiver 1 with a perceived QB downgrade was not what I had predicted for 2022. So I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'll have more on this subject later on, but the guy. Warren Sharp tweeted out a compilation that he captioned. It was something like
Tyler Lockett staying in the year, staying his career uninjured for whatever, playing all 16 games. I'm butchering that title, but like, yes.
It was like, it talked about how he's like 5'10", 185 pounds. And it was like, how does he stay healthy? And it's just every time he catches the ball, he just falls to the ground.
It
And
just goes right down.
it
And
just works.
I love it. The comments are all like people being pissy about it, being like, oh, what about those yards after catch? And I'm like, no, 100% here for it. Know yourself. Like, if you're a small guy and you want to play in this league for a long period of time, if I were in the NFL, if as soon as I'd catch it, I'd go down. I mean, why take the hit?
Yeah. All right. Who's your best tight end?
I mean, this one, I can't really pick anyone other than Travis Kelce. I mean, the gap between Travis Kelce and literally everyone else is just way too much to even think of. And so like it this year, more so than any other year, was the year where it felt to me where it's like the Travis Kelce or bust mantra rung true. And I was a guy who did not go with Travis Kelce, and I'll touch on the tight end that I did go with later. And then I was left streaming the position, and I can say firsthand, streaming the position is not a lot of fun. Though I'll give you some props because I rode with Chigokonkwo for a couple of weeks on your wise words. So I'll give you that. But yeah, Travis Kelce just like massively outperforming the tight end pool and somehow still doing it despite the fact that even without Tyreek Hill, there's one less weapon for defenses to worry about. Clearly the best tight end in fantasy for me this year.
Yeah. So I tried to come up with different arguments, and I'll submit one, but he, in half PPR scoring, he outscored the tight end 2 by about 91 points, 261.3 to TJ Hawkinson's 172.4. If you drafted him in tight end premium, you won your title. He's a modern marvel. And I think that there are fun conversations to be had about how Tony Gonzalez and Rob Gronkowski match up against Travis Kelce. And obviously, if you want a complete tight end, then Gronk's probably the play there. But like, I do think that Kelce is the greatest receiving tight end of all time. And again, there are conversations to be had about those other two guys, but like, he's not young anymore. He had those 2 or 3 games, I think, last year where he had that stinger, and when nerve issues don't go away quickly, they can kind of linger. And then we don't know how he was going to bounce back. He's 33 years old, and they lost Tyreek Hill and then like led the NFL in everything still. He's a modern marvel. I think the only other guy that's kind of worth mentioning just for fun, and I do love Chigozie Okonkwo, and I think he's a star in the making. The guy that I want to give props to here is Taysom Hill, who finishes the year as the tight end 5. And yes, his production was like as volatile as you could ever imagine. But I still think that I think that if you didn't have Kelce, Hawkinson, Kittle, and then maybe Evan Ingram, maybe Okonkwo or Dalton Schultz in these certain situations, I can see starting people over him. But like, if you didn't have those guys or Dallas Goedert, there's no tight end that has 2 pass attempts and 7 rush attempts and maybe a target like in his wheelhouse. Like the unique potential that Taysom Hill at least brought to the table every week, I think he should have been more of a mainstream discussion as a top 5 tight end every week. Because you can start Cole Kmet, do that, have fun. You can start David Njoku after a high ankle sprain. Okay, whatever. Just what Hill had access to. And I know he literally had weeks, I think he had maybe 2 where he didn't score any points. And I'm still like fine with that, because the 6 points that I was lucky to get from one of these other guys, it doesn't friggin' matter. So I'll give Taysom Hill gets for me, the non-Travis Kelce best tight end of the year award.
I'll give you props for that, because I was laughing because I think it's hilarious that Taysom Hill is the tight end 5 and had 9 catches. It's just like that shouldn't exist. That shouldn't be a thing. But you're totally right. It's the uniqueness of how he can score. And if you're looking at like whatever is it, like opportunity is the best tunity, or whatever, or availability is the best, whatever it is. Yeah. The fact that your basic tight end you're going to get off waivers. The only way he's going to get you fantasy production is by scoring a touchdown, right? There's just no tight end on waivers is such a reliable target share of an offense that you could survive if he, didn't score a touchdown and got you 90 yards on whatever, 8 catches. The fact that Taysom Hill had 3 different ways that he could score you a touchdown any single game, and sometimes did 2, sometimes did all 3, sometimes did 1, sometimes did not. Like, I think that is an aspect of his game that is, while extremely volatile, is like weirdly more reliable than your waiver wire tight end who you're just kind of like hoping is in a great matchup and catches a touchdown for you, because that's all you can really expect from them. So yeah, I love to mock him, and I love to mock Sean Payton and the Saints organization for giving him a shit ton of money, but yeah, the guy is a versatile weapon, and certainly lived up to that mantra this year, despite the Saints offense being kind of a hodgepodge of crap.
Yes. And plus Chris Olave.
Of course.
So my best running back of the year is going to go to Jerick McKinnon, because I think, one, his late season run is super noteworthy, but I'm just looking at his season long box score stuff. He averaged 4.2 rushing attempts per game and 4.2 targets per game. And I think that we when we think about these formats, like the old school non-PPR scoring, or even today's half PPR, we can kind of weight rushing, I think too highly. So if you look at like his yards per rush attempt, 4.04, yards per reception, 9.14. And I know that there aren't very many, non-PPR or standard scoring leagues alive today, but I think that the passing game, especially for running backs, has always just been this thing that even in non-PPR is still so much more valuable than just a pure rushing workload. And it's why seasons that we got from Dameon Pierce and Travis Etienne were just so agonizing. Yeah. Like, Derrick Henry had a higher targets per route run than Travis Etienne. That's
devastating.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much meat left on the bone there. And so it's cool to see, even on this like kind of mild to moderate workload, when we get these guys that are part of elite offenses that are used correctly. And it's just in Jerick McKinnon's case, a guy that he's just good at the game, as Silva would say. He's like 29 years old or something. I don't have his age in front of me, but like, he's not young. He had crazy knee injuries and everything. And he's finishing as the I think it's the half PPR RB 21. And this was a dude who really frequently was not drafted.
Oh God, no.
Yeah. So props to you, Jerick McKinnon. How about you, Pete?
He also finished as, I'm going to ignore Dontrell Hilliard in this example, but he also finished as basically the RB1 in per rating. So he had averaged 1.28 fantasy points per touch. And so to what you're saying too, especially in a Chiefs offense, but what you're saying is not only is the passing game work more efficient, it's also that translates on a fantasy perspective. And we've seen obviously more and more RB1s. It's very rare to see an RB1 who doesn't have any passing game work. And then guys who shift more to the passing game than the running game can actually be, even if you're not playing PPR, if you're just in half point, or in Jerick McKinnon's case, who turned those into touchdowns. I mean, the guy was getting a whole bunch of red zone targets. That still can carry through. A touchdown is a touchdown, no matter how you're getting it. So Jerick McKinnon, that his conclusion to the season was league winning. And he still finished with an extremely efficient, 1.28 is absurd in terms of the amount of production that he was getting per touch. And that was true throughout most of the season, even with it before he had an increased work share. I bounced between two different running backs here. I don't really want to give props, but quick side note, I'll say Josh Jacobs was drafted as the RB22, finished as the RB2. Good for you, Josh. The guy who I really want to talk about, and it's not to say that this isn't anything wowing or incredible, but Austin Eckler. 2 years in a row, Austin Eckler has just been a fantasy machine. And I looked back on it. So this year, he was the RB5 in per, so 1.05 fantasy points per touch, finished as the RB1 in half point PPR. And last year, he also finished as a top, I think he was the RB1 in terms of net consistency rating. He was a top 5 running back in fantasy in half point PPR and 1.1 fantasy point per touch last year. So it has been 2 years in a row now that Austin Eckler has just put up absurdly efficient fantasy performances and has been and stayed healthy with a full workload on his shoulders. So props to Austin Eckler, man. And I never want to include this into my thoughts, but it is fun when he does care about fantasy football. He is one of those players who does like to engage in fantasy football. And I totally get that players can have a negative relationship with fantasy football because people can be real assholes about it on the socials. But it's very fun to see Austin Eckler not only perform at such a high level for both fantasy and on the field, but also then be yeah, you had me on your fantasy team. Glad I got you the win. Kind of joining in on the fun that he and the enjoyment that he's bringing to people who are on his team. So have to give a shout out to him, who's just been put together 2 wildly efficient seasons in back-to-back years.
Yeah, he recorded a congratulations video to Pat Carrain, and yeah, that's so cool. Shout out to Pat, friend of the show.
Crazy.
Yeah, happy for that guy. All right, Pete, start us off here with one of your 2022 hits.
I will go with a guy whom I talked about. He was one of my top quarterback targets, and I won't say that it was anything daring or anything, but Tua Tagovailoa was going pretty low in terms of ADP, and he wasn't being regarded as one of those elite fantasy quarterbacks this year. Obviously, injuries have really kind of muddled his season in terms of overall performance. But he still finished when he was on the field, an elite fantasy quarterback. He led all quarterbacks in per rating, averaging 0.56 fantasy points per attempt, and was able to take full advantage of the offensive weapons that surrounded him. And so I think while I hope that he gets healthy and stays healthy and those 3 concussions that he had that we know of in quick succession don't ultimately kind of really mess things up for him. He's a guy who I think I will be targeting again going into 2023, as he's had another year in this offense, another year to get comfortable with these receivers. And they're both, we saw it from both of them. I did not expect, and I'll say this, I did not expect Jalen Waddle to have quite the season that he did, but the 2 of them, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle together, that is just so much speed for defenses to worry about. And Tua's accuracy, I think, has been able to really take that, put that on full display and take full effect of that. So he was a guy who I was drafting and was pretty pleased coming out on top with him.
He is going to be fascinating to watch. So Miami is, I don't remember, someone tweeted this out this morning. Oh, I think it was Arjun. What is it? What does he go by? Arjun Memnon or something on Twitter. But he had some graphic that he put up that was communicating basically available resources for team building. And the Dolphins are pretty low. They don't have a lot to work with. And the team, they traded for Bradley Chubb, who significantly improved their pass rush in season. Tua is going to be really, really interesting moving forward as sort of does he just become Jimmy Garoppolo, or is he better than that? Because you watch, I hate to watch the film shit, but you watch the film and he's putting some fluttery balls out there that fall short, and there are, even with this lights out explosive offense, he is throwing short on some plays, and they're leaving touchdowns on the field. It's going to be the ultimate test of does he go past Kirk Cousins, who I hold in high regard, just for a guy who can efficiently move the chains? And is he Brady, or is he Jimmy Garoppolo and Kirk Cousins? And even if he's one of those, I think they can still win a Super Bowl. I think he's good enough to keep them in contention for that, or at least make it to, what is, I guess, AFC Championship game. I think that what they have, they could get there, but can he work with his like, I don't know, 70th percentile physical toolbox? I know the hip dislocation that he had in college, I think that hurt him a bit. I know that injury is like, shout out to Adam Levitan. He was on James White as like retiring.
Yeah.
When he was on that in like June, just because hip dislocations suck. But what can Tua be? I mean, he's actually, I probably hold him in a similar light that I did Devontae Smith, where I looked at him and went, I think he's fine this year.
Right.
I'm not in on him. I'm not like fading him, but I'm not, oh man, I'm so pumped to draft this guy. He wasn't there for me. He proved me wrong. What will he be? I mean, Mike McDaniel looks like simultaneously the smartest. He's like the smartest idiot. Like, he's such a great play caller, and then what he did with Tua's health is like,
it's just abhorrent.
Right? Yeah, it's worthy of intense condemnation. And I hated watching the friggin' Thursday night games, and they got that the former college guy who's now calling games, and he just keeps. College sports is such an exploitative thing that I think they're used to papering over
traumatic head injuries.
Well, just that, yes, certainly, but just the overall exploitative nature of that ecosystem. And so when you're commenting on it, you go out of your way to like praise the character and the leadership of the coach. And I remember watching this, and like Tua's, he played after that one game where he definitely had a concussion, but was allowed to go back in and everything. And then he gets knocked out of the next game. And I'm watching the announcers talk about what a great guy Mike McDaniel is. And I'm like, I want to like Mike McDaniel so much. He's such a brilliant play caller. I think offensive play calling is the lifeblood of the NFL. And then also, oh my God, how did you put that guy on the field? Again, like, we can say that about multiple times this year. So Tua, his future to me is like murky as hell.
He feels like a guy who a lot of people, going into 2023, I feel like is how people felt about Jalen Hurts going into this year, right? Where you're like, pure real football, fantasy football side, real football wise, it's like, okay, is he the guy? Can he be the guy? Is he going to take that big leap? And I think we've seen it from a fantasy perspective that Tua can put up numbers, and it's whether or not from the actual football perspective, he is going to continue to do that, or given the opportunity to do that, or if we're going to see something from Miami where, they don't have a lot, maybe it's bringing in a veteran. I don't know what you do with that quarterback position, but if it's something where it's like Tua has another couple of injuries or struggles or whatever it is, do we see a shift there? And does that shift kind of ultimately tank what would be a guy who, from a pure fantasy standpoint, ignoring the real football side of things, can be like an elite QB1 on a week-to-week basis? And if you're investing in that, you would hate to see him 3 weeks into the season, 4 weeks into the season, get supplanted because he can't, you're right, Nick, because he doesn't have the physical tools to like take them to that next level that they need to go.
Yeah, fortunately, I think that they're back. I think that Teddy Bridgewater and Skylar Thompson are like kind of as good as you can hope for in number 2 and number 3 quarterbacks. And that's, saying as much as it isn't, but it's like they're in position to keep the train humming if they need to. But
and they're also great. They're like good 2s and 3s who aren't going to have a unique skill set that makes them so desirable to like play over. You know what I mean? Sure. Like, it's not, you're not having someone sitting back there on the bench with like just a cannon who's like a raw, whatever, Jimmy G, Trey Lance, for lack of a better comparison, where you're just like, if Trey Lance gets on the field, Jimmy G probably is not getting his job back. And we already saw that until he got injured. But that same instance where it's like, if Tua gets down and Teddy Bridgewater plays for him, you're not going to be like, all right, Teddy Bridgewater, take over, baby, let's ride. You're gonna be like, okay, Teddy Bridgewater, get us through these games. And then Tua's coming back onto the field.
There's no Mike White.
There's no Mike White sitting in the wings. God, Zach Wilson, go retire.
What a little baby boy. It's no wonder he's doing the dating moms thing.
Good Lord.
Anyway, Ramondre Stevenson is one of my hits.
He's on my list too. Good. I don't have to talk about him now. Love it.
Stevenson was so interesting. We get caught up in how to say this? The hardest part with fantasy is trying to figure out the coach's intention. And Bill Belichick has for a long time operated with a running back committee. And so it makes sense that Damian Harris, coming off that season that he had, was going to be just like the guy, the early down guy, and then Ramondre was going to be relegated to the third down role. But what I really liked about Ramondre is one of my favorite tweets of all time was an Evan Silva preseason video where he just clipped the one badass Ramondre run where the caption was just like, it was something of Ramondre Stevenson, cold baller. And like he said, he got cold baller, I think, to like be bolded on Twitter, which I don't know how to do, but he put it in asterisks, and it was like, we knew this guy was a cold ball. Anyway, he can run, and he's built like, a slightly slimmer LeGarrette Blount, and he can catch passes. And I know that Bill Belichick has had a difficulty adjusting to the modern day NFL offensively, but what Ramondre offered in his skill set was like a seriously big-bodied, true dual threat running back. And that at his ADP, which was like 9th round, on like underdog and stuff, is far too low. And so what I thought he had a chance to do was at worst split early down rushing and then take the passing downs. And it turns out, aided by Damian Harris injury, but he was already doing his thing before those injuries happened. He just took a full on bell cow role. So that seemed to me to be in his wheelhouse. What the guy who I likened him to was like a higher volume Shane Vereen. Mm-hmm. But Vereen's, he's a lot more lightweight. Like we're talking about a 230-pound banger who can catch passes like Vereen.
Yeah, this offseason for me, the narrative, it was especially after James White retired, where I was just like, all right, this backfield just got a whole lot clearer to me. It's, even if it is Damian Harris is your 1 and 2 down back, Ramondre Stevenson is taking that passing work. Like I was in it, even if it was just that, because of what I had seen from Ramondre Stevenson as a runner, as a pass catcher, and what we know that James White role to be in the Patriots offense. Now it's not Tom Brady under center, but it still is the Patriots offense that does love to target their running backs and utilize them in the passing game. And so to me, it was like, all right, you're getting Ramondre Stevenson. There's uncertainty about this backfield in terms of what his role is going to be as a rushing back. But it doesn't seem like Damian Harris has never been a pass catcher. So I was like, there's no challenge. There's no competition there. It's Ramondre Stevenson's going to be the third down back. And we talked about it when we were talking about Jerick McKinnon at the top of the show. Passing game is still, like, even if that's all the running back gets, that's highly efficient and super valuable. And then it just turned into, he got the opportunity. He's an exceptional runner of the football. And so when he got that starting gig and Damian Harris was on the sideline, he just took it and didn't relinquish it at all. And I think there is a lot that I hope happens and changes this offseason with the Patriots offense. But Ramondre Stevenson being the back and a focal point of this offense, I hope does not, because he did exceptionally well. And I really loved seeing him run. And of course, loved him on my fantasy team doing those things.
All right. So my second hit was Dameon Pierce. And he sort of hit as much as he didn't for me. And so I was very interested in Dameon Pierce, and I was really fortunate. I didn't win a ton on underdog, but I won a couple leagues, and I was drafting Pierce as the presumed starter in Houston in like early to mid July. And so for that reason, I thought he was going to have more of a passing game role. But for that reason, just as a flag plant weeks before training camp even started, I'm calling that I got that one right. But his usage was inexcusable. This was a dude who entered the league with a really impressive pass catching profile, and they ground him into an early down rushing role.
Awful.
Yeah, and people seem to think the running back with Achilles injury thing. So a big part of the analysis was Marlon Mack is not a capable football player anymore because of the Achilles rupture. The running back Achilles thing, we now have three guys that we can really study: Donta Foreman, Cam Akers, Marlon Mack. The early season acceptance of Cam Akers as just being the guy and drafting him in the fourth round or higher was insane to me. I had him ranked as like the RB40 entering the year. I realize I'm digressing here, but it's just I think that those three guys are going to be really interesting to continue collecting data on moving forward. But Dameon Pierce, the dude was a baller. He had a really great early season streak. He unfortunately, I think it was the high ankle sprain that landed him on injured reserve, but they really need to not just throw him the ball on early downs like Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon. They need to get him involved on passing downs. And I loved Rex Burkhead. I know you loved Rex Burkhead too.
Sexy Rexy,
but
can't say no.
That's right. But that was poor player usage on Lovie Smith and Pep Hamilton's part. And I don't know what the hell was going on there, because it didn't seem to me like we got the Pep Hamilton offense. So that was really confusing, because Lovie had made a bunch of statements about how he was turning the offense over to Hamilton. And then we just got a Lovie Smith boring offense. But anyway, Dameon Pierce, for the time that he was out there, he was a big time fantasy producer and just a fun guy to draft in like round 12 or whatever it was. So Dameon Pierce, calling him a hit.
Yeah, I wrote about him after the preseason as a guy who's, even after the preseason, he was still going like at least past the 8th round, because I had late round RBs who could be RB1s, and he was just, anytime there are lots of lessons that people learn from a fantasy year. And I feel like a lesson that people learned this year is that rookie wide receivers in bad offenses don't do well, or just it's a lot harder for them. But rookie running backs in bad offenses can, like a good running back can just get you something because of the amount of touches that they just get inherently. Like when I wrote that article, I did some numbers, and it was like over the last 4 or 5 years, I think it was like 86% or 85% of running backs who'd had 200 and 20 plus touches finished RB1s or RB2s, and 45% finished RB1s. I should remember the actual numbers. Anyways, the point is that like once you hit 200 plus touches, you're going to be a pretty serviceable fantasy back, no matter how efficient you are. Like it's just purely that volume. And so Dameon Pierce as a rookie running back on a bad team with no real running back competition around him, it just felt like, yeah, he's going to easily get 200 touches. Like, I don't know how you're not going to hit that. So he was a guy too. And I know you were high on him early. And so I also was going up at that. So like, yeah, he was a guy who I just felt like that's a situation where it's probably going to be a pretty clear win, and you're getting him at a huge discount. So there's no real risk to it.
So one guy who I was not a win for me is AJ Dillon. Now, I was not terribly high on AJ Dillon, but I have to go back and check my top 150. I may have ranked him ahead of or like right next to Aaron Jones. Like I really thought that he was going to take on perhaps the role that most people were thinking Dameon Pierce was going to take on, or Damian Harris was going to take on. Like I thought just 200 carries and being the featured goal line guy, but he also was able to command targets and play efficiently in the passing game last year. He had sure hands, caught 34 of 37 targets in 2021. I thought that Dillon was going to kind of change the guard in Green Bay. And something we didn't talk about with the New England guys was just the contract situation of the New England running backs. I think that was another nod toward Ramondre, because I think this was Harris's last year under deal under contract. But anyway, yeah, I thought that this would be a big year for AJ Dillon, and then he just sucked like crazy. He was so bad, and the deployment. I mean, I know there were a lot of injuries in the Packers offense, but the deployment just seemed bizarre to me with a lot of these guys. What was your stance on Dylan?
I mean, he saved it in the second half of the season because he still somehow managed to wind up with 770 yards and 7 touchdowns this season. But that was because from week 12 onwards, he scored 6 touchdowns. So if you held on to him that long, good on you. But I don't know how. For me, Dylan, I was all on Aaron Jones this year, and just because I was like, I didn't quite buy the AJ Dillon thing, or the other thing I was going on to was also just that, like, why not both? Like, sure, let them both eat. Aaron Jones maybe gets more funneled into the passing game, and AJ Dillon more funnels into the goal line based on body type or whatever. But yeah, I definitely did not expect AJ Dillon's, I guess it's his efficiency, because I'm looking at it and his usage isn't like awful. I mean, there are only a couple of games where he didn't have double-digit touches. It was just that he was averaging, 3, 2, 3, 3, not a lot of yards to those touches, and wasn't getting the like presumed goal line work that we were anticipating. But yeah, he was a guy who I think a lot of people were really buying high on, and it didn't come to fruition, which, it happens, because let me tell you, Nick, one of my misses this year, I need Kyle Pitts to please be in an offense that loves him as much as I do, because I don't understand how you draft a tight end in the top 5 and then not make him basically the focal point of your offense. And it's not just a tight end. It's like the single most freakish athlete build physical specimen to ever play the position in the history of the universe. And you're just not utilizing him in a way that I mean, you break down X's and O's and watch more tape than I do, but like it blows my mind how poorly he was used in Atlanta this year. And we saw flashes of his just like freakish abilities. And I will die on the Kyle Pitts hill until he retires. I don't think that there will be a year where I don't talk myself into him being the year, just because he is that physically gifted. But man, I'm going to have a hard time. Like, I just wish we were able to see all that he could offer on full display in an offense that's like willing to utilize him, willing to throw the ball. And yes, you have Marcus Mariota under center. I don't know what your excuse is, Arthur Smith. Just get him the ball. Just get Kyle Pitts the ball and let him work his magic, because he is just that good.
I think the guy who's handled Pitts the best is friend of show Jax Falcone. We talked about this when he came on the show in August. He had a nice little tweet where he talked about, I think it was like rookies to have over 1,020 receiving yards, and a certain amount of catches. And it was like 10 guys, and 2 of the names next to each other were Kyle Pitts and Randy Moss. And they weren't consecutive because Moss had like 15 touchdowns or whatever. But he then also takes the time to say, through the season, Kyle Pitts, his like, if you look at his per route efficiency, his targets per out run, yards per out run, the dude is still like freakazoid alien productive, but he's just not getting the volume. And his summation is kind of like, yeah, he actually looks like he still might be the best tight end ever, or at least like tight end prospect ever. But like, we just suck at evaluating this position and setting expectations, because it's just, he probably won't develop into Travis Kelce, because no one can develop into Travis Kelce. Right. But in terms of like what the dude is actually, like, his underlying stuff points to is still like historic, awesome dude. We just have to readjust what we expect out of the tight end position, period, which is kind of the thesis with the Taysom Hill play. But I think I don't remember who it was I saw saying on Twitter, but someone was like, they took Kyle Pitts and asked him to play wide receiver when Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle were still on the board. And like, yeah, that was really fucking dumb. Like, pardon the language there, but that was crazy stupid. You shouldn't have done that. And, his a rookie year, I don't know what the hell they were letting go on with Calvin Ridley. Like, how do you not have a better grip on the locker room?
Yeah.
That seems kind of strange to me, but um, asking him to go play X receiver as a rookie when he's not a receiver, he's a receiving tight end. I just like the deck has been stacked so heavily against him. Arthur Smith has to be on the hot seat right now. And
Yeah.
you mentioned Mariota. What is the point? We still have the narrative that you need to give quarterbacks the opportunity to develop. I have a difficult time. I understand that, and I used to hold that idea, but I now challenge the idea. How do you develop? By practicing? You develop by doing something, by taking repetitions. Holding a clipboard is not development. Why would you draft Desmond Ridder at the beginning of the second round and then play Mark? What the hell? Like,
or wait this long to play him.
Yeah, at least start him, like Lamar Jackson. I think he started in week 9 of his rookie season. Maybe it was week 10. Like, okay, sure, do that. But what was the point of bringing? You either failed to evaluate and thought, yeah, we can go to the playoffs with Marcus Mariota. And for angry Atlanta fans, we almost did go to the playoffs. Yeah. And you had an under 500 record. You just got lucky because you're in the worst division in football. Like, the whole thing, there just seems to be a lot of, I used to love Arthur Smith, and he still can make a running game hum, but it's a very strange situation. And I think that I'll still be in on drafting Kyle Pitts in 2023. My hope is that I can take him in like round 6.
If he's no longer of that huge tight end 1 premium. Yeah. If he's no longer considered of that like top 3 group, then that return could just be too tasty to pass up.
Would you draft non-Kelsey tight ends in rounds 1 through 3?
No.
And maybe that's a conversation we have in the 2023 thought section, but like the drop off in that position, like that's
it's wild, man. It's so wild. And that's the thing is that I was so certain that Kyle Pitts was just going to be that like the successor to Kelsey in terms of just like, yeah, he's going to be a tight end 1 every single year. You don't even have to think about it. You draft him and you're doing great. That's not coming to fruition. I just did a quick search trying to recreate the search you were talking about. And I think what I've got for players in their first 16 games with at least 65 receptions and 1,000 yards. And there are 22 of them, wide receivers and tight ends. And I think Kyle Pitts might be the only tight end on that list. Unless you consider Kelvin Benjamin a tight end.
Yeah, there you go.
Kelvin Benjamin, man. Kelvin Benjamin, 73 catches, 1,008 yards, and 9 touchdowns his rookie year.
An astonishing
journey. And then gone from the league. But yes, most of these guys are all Hall of Fame or extremely productive wide receivers. And Kyle Pitts. Also, and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave.
This season I tried to lean into rookie wide receivers more than I have previously.
Well, because they're just getting so good.
Yeah, I do think that that's still an edge to be exploited. I think my AirPods are dying here. But I think that it's still a position. I think that drafting these early round wide receivers, I think the rookies, I think that it's worthwhile doing. I think that we should do it. I think we still need to anchor with veterans, but like I had always kind of shied away from rookie wide receivers. And I think that I was wrong in having done that. I don't mean like, enter next year with the 2023 versions of Olave, Drake London, and Christian Watson as your starting 3. But like, I think there's more to be learned in that section, but more to be learned on my end with Russell Wilson, who is my biggest miss of 2022. And again, I'll give a language warning. What the fuck went on here?
What happened in Denver?
So Nathaniel Hackett, not capable as a coach. And it probably was a larger reason than we knew that kept Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, because they made that sign. Denver signed Nathaniel Hackett with the hope that they could lure Aaron Rodgers away. And now it makes a lot more sense to me that Aaron Rodgers, who I figured would want to get out of Green Bay,
Right.
went, no way. I'm not, like, that guy's an idiot. I'm not going over there. But Nathaniel Hackett is inept beyond belief. Russell Wilson, though, I don't know why he failed. It doesn't make sense to me. Now, I have had conversations with my physical therapists about mallet finger, and my main guy, when that injury happened, he said, I don't know if you've read about this, but like, that's going to change how he holds the football forever. He's going to have to retrain completely. And Russell went back to doing his Twitter posts where he was saying, no time to sleep, and he's rehabbing 19 hours a day and everything. Maybe he shouldn't have done that. Maybe he should have listened to medical professionals. Yeah, maybe he should have slept. Maybe he should have not come back so early. Maybe that screwed up the rehab. We won't know that. He has always been a crazy weirdo head case. And I recall after the infamous Super Bowl where he flew the team to Hawaii, and he did this thing where he either had the actual like ball that he threw the interception on, or like one of them from that game, but he basically did the ceremony in front of the team where he chucked a football off of a Hawaiian cliff into the surf and was like, I'm throwing our demons away and we're gonna start anew. And God,
no wonder Richard Sherman is like, peace, bro.
I know. So the fan in me was like, all right, that's showing leadership. I'm glad that he's, but the reports afterwards were like, the players were not impressed and they were pretty pissed off. And Marshawn, like, his comments to the media were, they wanted it, that Pete Carroll wanted him to be the star, which again, I hope that there's a tell-all written, because I think that we've had whispers that there were things going on in the Seattle locker room, like supposedly Golden Tate, being an unwelcome part of Russell Wilson's marriage, and Percy Harvin hating him, and Doug Baldwin hating him. And Doug Baldwin, was it Baldwin or no, Harvin, who punched Golden Tate?
There's all kinds of shit went down in that.
Yeah. There were strange things. And when Earl Thomas, when he ended up in Baltimore, there was weird things going on, extramarital things going on. It seems like Carroll might be the number one keep things in-house coach. And I wonder if we'll learn, I noticed early on when Wilson would give his press conferences and he would end every statement with "Go Hawks," and it was like clearly robotic and everything. But then you'd see videos of him loose at practice and he's joking with people. I hope that we get a tell-all at some point and we figure out what the heck went on, because I've never seen a failure like this from a quarterback. I mean, we've seen like Brett Favre, what was it when he went to the Jets? He didn't really have it anymore. And we've seen some things like that. But I've never seen such a precipitous just fall on your face while the garden rake is coming up and blasting you. Like, it was such a catastrophic failure. And then they bring Geno Smith in Seattle, and it's successful. And they go, what was really weird was Seattle being a pass first team
without Russ.
Carroll,
without Russ, Geno Smith under center.
With Geno Smith, and they weren't just pass first in like the box score rates, like they were pass first on early downs. They were
doing all the smart shit.
They were doing the smart shit. And so what? And what all the while Pete Carroll is doing press conferences and he's talking about how important it is to establish the run and how they're still a balanced team. I'm telling you, man,
I think that there is something about, like, sometimes you get a QB coach pairing that can just stand the test of time, and good for them. Even that, like, even the Brady Belichick stuff, like, I can't help but think at the end of, like, the reason they separated, they kind of just loathe. Like, I just think that there's so much that goes into, especially a quarterback coaching dynamic, where it's like the coach is supposed to be in charge of everything, but so much is like the quarterback doing his thing. And if you give preferential treatment to the quarterback, or if you give the quarterback maybe more say, it's just a weird dynamic. And I can totally understand how a pairing can eventually hit rocky waters, and how pairings don't really last that long, because even if you're like franchise quarterback and a franchise coach, done, you're set for a decade. It's like, nah, you're probably set for like maybe 5 years. And you're kind of hoping you milk a Super Bowl out of that, because otherwise, like, it just kind of, it seems to fall apart. There are so many egos in the way, and the only way to keep those egos quiet is you win 7 Super Bowls or 6 Super Bowls. Like, it's the only way.
What was bizarre was, even so, I mean, we knew like Doug Baldwin's nickname was Angry Doug, so like, okay, I can get him hating Wilson. Percy Harvin seems like an ego freak maniac asshole, so I can see him. I mean, Jesus, I haven't been able to find it, but I still watch it. I recall watching live. It was like after Harvin's like 3rd or 4th game with the team, and Wilson, they're interviewing the two of them, and Wilson is trying to buddy up with him, and he goes, he kind of leads to the microphone. He goes, "Lord have mercy, we have Percy." That's what I always say. And like, Percy Harvin doesn't just roll his eyes, his whole head goes up and he looks off screen. And like the cringe factor and stuff with
so
Wilson,
bad. It's so bad.
They hated him.
It's so bad.
And Lockett and Metcalf, they were doing like photo ops with Gino, like, this is our guy.
It's weird. It's a weird dynamic. But to fantasy, I tweeted about this because someone said, like, what's the thing you took away from 2022? And I was like, Russ can't cook. And then I was like, but I'm also going to tell you, man, that holy shit, am I going to buy into the Broncos offense at a discount? Because it's all there. It's all there. It's just like, how could you not buy into Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Albert O and
Tim Patrick?
And Tim Patrick is going to come back healthy, and Javonte Williams, and you have Russell. And if Russell Wilson can, like, if he's even whatever you saw in Seattle, like, that whole offense is going to cook. Especially, there's the reports that they're already like looking to figure out what they can trade for Sean Payton. If Sean Payton comes in, all bets are off, man. I'm drafting the entire Broncos offense, and we're just riding till we die.
I think it's Wilson. They don't have anything else to trade.
You think they're going to trade Wilson for Sean
Well,
Payton?
they did. But they don't, like, so
they don't have picks. You're right.
They give up like 3 first-round picks and everything, right?
Can we talk about that? What if the Denver Broncos trade Russell Wilson after 1 year for Sean Payton? And then, anyways, all kinds of fun shit this offseason.
I always thought that Sean Payton and Russell Wilson were the perfect pairing.
Oh, I feel like
because he was like Drew Brees 2.0.
Yeah, I feel like they're perfect. I feel like they're great together.
But Nathaniel Hackett out. Sorry, this is the last thing I'll say. To your point about the loaded offense, the moment Nathaniel Hackett exited, suddenly Albert O is just smashing on linebackers. And so next year, they've got the 3 receivers we talked about. They also have Greg Dulcich and apparently Albert O. Like, and then we haven't even talked about Javonte's still there.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like, good job, Latavius, but like, hopefully they bring in another running back just to get some fresh legs in there that aren't 32 years old. But like, that offense, Garrett Bowles, Lloyd Cushenberry, they'll be healthy again. It's so good.
It has it, and it's just like all the things that, like, you talked. I mean, yes, it made sense this year. It was a wild ride, and it was mind-blowing that it didn't work out in the way that it did. Like, it wasn't even just that it didn't work out. It was catastrophically awful on all levels. And that is a truly incredible feat. And yet we all rode the Bronco country. But in 2023, like, we'll talk about 2023 thoughts, but like, I can't help myself but think, like, I'm gonna draft so much Broncos. I just can't not do it, because there's going to be, unless there's not a discount. If there's not a discount, if enough people in the industry like have talked themselves into it that you're not really getting them at a discount, then all right, then I'm happy out. But like, if I can get Cortland Sutton as like a wide receiver 4 or 5, if I can get him in like the 45-50 range, well, am I going to say no to that?
Is there any way that Russell Wilson's ADP is at a quarterback 1 rate?
No,
right?
There's no way. There's no way. In which case, I'm definitely drafting Russell Wilson.
Let's pride. Okay. Did you have one more miss? I don't remember.
Yeah. I mean, we could briefly touch on. I was certain that Zeke was going to just be Zeke because Jerry Jones wanted him to be Zeke, and that didn't happen. I was all aboard that. Like in most teams, you can be like, yes, they'll make the smart move. And Tony Pollard was clearly the more efficient back. Ezekiel Elliott was not being as efficient, had not been for a while as Tony Pollard. And eventually that's what they did because Zeke got injured and it all worked. But I was just like, if there's one team where you throw that out the window, it is the Dallas Cowboys, because Jerry Jones will meddle, and he gave Zeke $1 billion, and Zeke has been like a routine year RB1 every single year of his career. And I was just like, you're going to get him at a discount. This is an easy home run to me. Did not come to fruition. I drafted him in my home league. I traded him after week 4 and won my league because of it. So sitting pretty, but yeah, he was a guy who I was certain was just going to be like plug and play RB1, and it did not turn out that way.
Yep. I was surprised that they stuck with Pollard. Happy that they stuck with Pollard after Zeke came back, but I was surprised. I didn't expect it.
I didn't expect that either.
All right. So for 2022 thoughts, we had 2013 was the last time. When was that? There was some year where Odell Beckham Jr. was like the 1.01, and we had this wide receiver. Wide receivers were being drafted as the like top 3 to 5 players, even in home leagues.
Mm-hmm.
And then it quickly reverted back to running backs dominating the couple early picks. My thoughts for 2023 are, I think that we're going to go back to wide receivers being the early guys. And I think like Austin Eckler may still be a top 3 pick, but I kind of feel like Justin Jefferson will be the 1.01. And then maybe it's Eckler, but then Jamar Chase. I think that even in home leagues, I think that early around wide receiver will be a if not the majority used strategy, a like plurality used strategy. What do you think?
Yeah, I was actually, it's funny you say that, because I think the thing that I noticed most about this year was that the RB1 guys were the RB1 guys. That it felt like in years past you had a lot, or maybe this is just from my off the top of my head, I haven't done the research to back this up, but it has felt like in years past that more fringe guys or more surprising guys in the running back division or position made it into RB1 conversations or fringe RB1 conversations, and that you could do the 0 RB strategy, or not spend early on one of those big guys and still get really solid production from your running backs. And it felt like this year was the revert back to, no, you kind of need those dudes. Like those top guys who are going early are the guys who are ultimately going to get you. Because if you look at top PPR, half point PPR finishes, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs, we talked about, but top guys, the names, brand names, Austin Eckler, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones. That's your top 12. That's all in the top 12. Other guys were Ramondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard, and Josh Jacobs. So like those, the majority of those are like the brand names in terms of RB1s. And so I don't think you're wrong in that, like the difference between, Josh Jacobs, who is the RB2 in half point PPR, I have his total is 295.8 fantasy points. Justin Jefferson, 295.5 in half point PPR. So it's like the wide receiver production is so elite that you're getting, there's not a drop off between drafting Justin Jefferson 101 and drafting Christian McCaffrey 101. So because of that, you might get more running back or wide receivers going early. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm always interested in terms of like optimal draft strategy and what emerges. Because for me, I always get my running back early, and then I'll kind of double stack wide receivers, and then I'll go running back again. That tends to be my strategy. But it is interesting if I'm sitting at that 101 or 102, do I pass up a guy like Justin Jefferson? Or, I mean, again, Stephon Diggs, I know he's getting older, but Stephon Diggs is just, with Josh Allen, so efficient and so productive that he's a real hard guy to pass up. So, like, do you get one of those elite guys, or do you go with a Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry? And I think the biggest thing that plays into it there too is also injury, right? The running back position tends to get banged up a lot more, and you have a lot more games missed with injury. And you're an injury guy, and so you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the feeling that I have. And so running back, a wide receiver going early is like, okay, there's a greater chance that I'm going to get 16 or 17 games of Stephon Diggs than I'm going to get 16, 17 games of Christian McCaffrey.
I think the positional injuries are so interesting. I think the one thing that just sucks for running backs are that high ankle sprains derail the year. And they really hurt all positions, but like Adam Hutchinson's injury index, he has a whole section just about how high ankle sprains will just affect running backs for the rest of the year. And I like, their ankle sprains, unfortunately, are common. They're easy injuries to suffer. And it's that can just take out your first pick if your running back suffers one. I think the way I'd probably phrase it is like the dead zone running backs are emphatically dead. That 4 to 6 or 7 round, like, if they're not good enough for us to know they're going to get the work, I think it's best to try to swing for the fences, but just by continuing to draft wide receivers or Kyle Pitts, of course. But
of course, I mean, Kyle Pitts 101. Who says no?
Yeah.
It's also a strategy too, where like I'm not against, because especially the wide receiver position is so rich, and you can get guys who just put up just ridiculous stretches of time due to injury, target share, what have you. But maybe that's not their actual future. This was a strategy I actually did this year, which I liked a lot in my home league, was drafting a couple just trustworthy stud RBs. I had Christian McCaffrey and Ramondre Stevenson. And then I basically just loaded up on wide receivers. And I got some fringe running backs with my thought being that, like, if I need to, I'll just flip one of these wide receivers for a running back who I think can, situation suddenly emerges. So I did that. I got Travis Etienne before he blew up with the Jaguars when they traded James Robinson. And I got Ken Walker right after Rashad Penny's injury.
So, I mean, that's anchor RB. Right, you got one early running back,
right,
and you drafted a shit ton of wide receivers and a tight end, and then you came back and got your RB2 in like round 9.
Yeah,
like that's love it.
Yeah, and that's right. and then using those guys as trade fodder. I want to give before we go, I want to give you a quick rookie wide receiver comparison going into 2023.
Okay,
because one guy. And maybe you've already seen this. I saw someone, and I wish I could remember, but someone on Twitter tweeted this out. And so I'm giving you credit without knowing who it was. So if you listen, credit to you. But Christian Watson, agree with me, Nick, or let me know if you agree with me in that Christian Watson, I feel like everyone is going to be like, oh, got to draft me some Christian Watson this year because of what he did in the season. And he's a surefire RB1 and our wide receiver 1 and blah, 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 whatever you want to say about it. Christian Watson started 11 games, played 14 games for the Packers, 66 targets, 41 receptions, 611 yards, 7 touchdowns. He had a 1.88 per rating, 10 fantasy points per game in half-point PPR, 41.7 touchdown percentage. That's Christian Watson as a package. There's another rookie wide receiver who put up basically identical stats, whom I think people are nowhere near. It does not have the name recognition. Started 10 games, played 12 games, had 61 targets, 35 receptions, 523 yards, and 7 touchdowns, had a 1.81 per rating, 9.3 fantasy points per game, and a 41% touchdown percentage. So slightly lower percentage than Christian Watson, which we'd like to see. Do you have any guesses off the top of your head who that rookie wide receiver might be?
Rashid Shaheed?
It is not Rashid Shaheed, but that's a decent guess. No, it is Jahan Dotson for the Washington Commanders. It's just this is a specific example in the sense of like Jahan Dotson might be Christian Watson, but at a discount, but more so also just that like there are going to be a lot of names that I feel like people are going to be really, really high on. And whatever analytics you choose to put your faith into, which is a total personal preference, and I will obviously advocate for the ones that we create, but you find the ones that you want, see what other players have similar numbers and put up similar numbers, and see where you can find value in that. And obviously situations are different, but like, I think there are a lot of names or a lot of guys where people, that name rattles around in their head all offseason. Oh, Christian Watson really ended really well. That's amazing. I'm going to just draft Christian Watson, only to find out that like his production was mirrored by other players whom you can get at a much larger discount because that name wasn't rattling around in people's heads. And so just something that I like to go into the next year is like, compare what analytics you think are that you put your faith into and see what crops up and what shows up. Because I know, for instance, for you, Nick, one of the reasons you're so big on Chikakonkwo is that his analytics, his raw numbers are so comparable and favorable to the elite tight ends. And that is somewhere where it's like, okay, I could get, now tight end position is one we've talked about many times, but maybe I can get like TJ Hawkinson, or can I get a guy like Chikakonkwo who's much later, but putting up whose analytics or physical traits paint him to be an elite tight end. That one was the Watson Dotson combination was one that I saw someone tweet out, and I was like, oh, that's a really good one, where it's like one guy in my mind has the marketing done for him, and that might carry into the offseason, whereas another guy is going to go probably under the radar, but their production was more or less equal this year.
Yeah. So for me, the efficiency, I like what I like the process you're suggesting there. I think the easiest efficiency metrics to look at that I like to look at are just the per route numbers, and Watson has the handy edge there. Handily has the edge there.
Yeah.
Over Dotson, but I think that avoiding box scores is good. I think that trying to get into the closer we can get to the per play data, and by increasing the sample size, is really only good. Yeah, Dotson, I don't know what to think of the guy. I mean, I don't like Carson Wentz being there.
And that's so that's another thing too.
Okonkwo, I think that he will be a beast. And I think I thought I had something that I was going to add to this, but now I'm totally blanking out because my friggin' AirPods are
buzzing at you.
Me. But
yeah,
are they even? No, they just I just can't even hear you. This is professionalism at its
podcasting at its best. This is Nick staring at me like.
There we go. Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
There we go.
You're good.
Yeah.
A+.
Yeah. Oh, that was fantastic. So, where was I going? Well, so yeah, good for you. Keep using the efficiency metrics, because I think that they're using, when we can increase the sample size, it's only good. And one thing that we just need to keep doing as an industry is making advanced numbers more readily available to at-home leaguers, because they're not, I mean, it's not hard. Like we can all look at, oh, he's a 1,000-yard receiver. That's cool. If we can add 2.0 yards per out run is even better than being a 1,000-yard receiver. That's not hard. That's not like a hard thing to grasp. It's just 2.00. That's really easy for people to remember. One, we got to get that more into the lexicon, and two, we need to see more resources that show people different ways of looking at the game, show them the analytics are not scary. I think that the NerdBall efficiency stats, I think that they do a great job of opening that door. I think, shout out to 33rd Team for paying Sports Info Solutions an outrageous amount of money to have the Edge tool that just gives these things away for free somehow. I think that those types of things, those efforts are good and should be heralded and complimented. And, shout out to Patty for just being a friggin'
machine when it comes to these things.
He's so damn smart.
Yeah.
In a different life, he's a millie maker. And anyway, do you have any, I have said all that I have to say. Do you have any parting thoughts?
No, I have shared all. I'm sure I will have some as the off season continues, but as of now. This is all I came prepared with, Nicholas.
Cool. Well, it was great having you. It was great talking to you. I think that this was another successful season at NerdBall. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for reading. Thank you for following on all of the social media platforms. We see the numbers internally and are flattered by how many of you want to come read us. It's exciting. So be sure to follow all of us at NerdBallFF on Twitter. I think that's also the Instagram handle. Follow Pete Rogers at Pete M. Rogers. Or
yes,
is
sir.
there? Yeah, at Pete M. Rogers. Follow myself at Nic Bodiford NFL. Follow us all. Thank you all so much. Talk to you soon.